How about we give a little credit where it's due? Rich Cimini, ESPN, nailed it when the Aaron Rodgers controversy broke a couple of weeks ago when he missed practice. Everybody was wondering, playing Where's Waldo? Where in the world is Aaron Rodgers? Cimini tweeted out that perhaps Rodgers had taken a trip to Egypt where he had expressed an interest years earlier in going. So good job by Cimini. Let's talk a little bit about Aaron Rodgers. I'm Glenn Naughton with Jet Nation Radio, jetnation.com. Be sure to log into jetnation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. Give us a like, a follow. I'm at JNRadio_Glenn, co-host at D Terman, Dylan Terman, and at Chris Schubert. Just me for this one. We had apparently a storm that, being in England, I had no idea. Dylan and I were set to do a show last Wednesday. He messaged me last minute. Power was about to go out. Power, I think, did lose power for a little bit, so I had to bow out of that one. They did a follow-up on Friday. Be sure to check that out. Breaking down the AFC East team by team, predicting each team's record. Really enjoyed that one myself. So previous episode, give that one a look. Aaron Rodgers. Now this was confirmed the other day on a show. I think it was one of Aaron Rodgers' former team. Was it Valdez Scantling? I think came out, said he met with Aaron Rodgers to throw the ball around a little bit, and Rodgers had been in Egypt. So now he's back. He was at UFC. He was with Mercedes Lewis. A lot of much ado about nothing, right? Let's talk about the Rodgers thing. We've discussed it before, but Dan Leberfeld of Jets Confidential, who's been covering the Jets for a million years, did a great job pointing out the hip hop. And I like this from Dan Leberfeld because Dan's in the media, but he doesn't hesitate to call them out when they do hypocritical, dumb stuff. And that's what they're doing with Aaron Rodgers, right? Dan Leberfeld made one point, and then there's one thing I'd like to follow that up with. Leberfeld says that, part of the reason why these guys, let's get that out of the way right away. Jason says in the chat, doesn't look good with Rodgers not showing up. I don't necessarily disagree, Jason. I think, and I said this earlier, right? I'm not killing Rodgers for it. It's not going to cost them a single yard down, score, play, game. The impact of him missing a day and a half, 2 days of practice will be nothing in the grand scheme of things. However, with Rodgers having come out and making those statements last year about how everyone needs to be fully invested and we all need to be on board and limit distractions. And I said this before, right? Because other people have brought up those comments, but they've brought it up in a context that I think is nonsensical. I've seen people, when he goes on Joe Rogan, when he goes on, any interview, anytime he does an interview and says something publicly, I see people go, oh, I thought everyone was supposed to be bought in. Like, it's the offseason. What do you want to do? You think he's going to do a full offseason darkness retreat? Like, the guy is going to live his life. And he's a high-profile future Hall of Famer who's going to talk to people. Like, that's allowed. But, and I said this before, when you start missing football activities, and again, stay with me here, I don't believe there will be an impact. However, other than optics, that's really all it's going to be. Is it fans who hate Rodgers are going to have something to point to, and accurately, like, let's be fair. If you say 100% invested and then you're not showing up, all right, maybe you're 99.9% invested, and maybe that's enough. And I do think it's enough. I don't think this is going to have an impact. But it isn't a great look to say everyone's got to be fully invested and then you're not fully invested. Even if it's one practice, and it was only 2. So I'm kind of torn. On the one hand, zero impact in my mind. On the other hand, let's be consistent here. All right, as we say on our show all the time, 2 things can be true at the same time, because I feel like for whatever reason, a lot of people have lost sight of that, whether it's sports, real life, politics, whatever, like things, there can be multiple layers to something. And that's the situation with Rodgers. Will his play suffer? No. Is it a bad look because he said we all have to be all in? Yeah, kind of. Not the best look. But again, the impact is what will matter most. So Rodgers, back to Dan Leberfeld. Dan Leberfeld makes the point that, and by the way, Jets Confidential, check it out. I've been subscribing for years. Really good content from Dan. And like I said, he's been doing this for a million years. But Dan said that the reason why the media feels so comfortable going after Aaron Rodgers is because he gives them nothing, right? He doesn't trust them. We've seen him on McAfee, right? And we know the McAfee appearances are paid, but there's clearly a good chemistry there. He likes McAfee. There's some mutual respect there. And I think it's because it's just a couple of guys talking. It's not sort of watch what you say and don't say this and sort of tiptoeing around answers. And no, they're just a couple of guys talking, which I prefer, honestly, to a sort of an interview that's structured or where the team says, here's the points you want to hit on and here's the things you want to avoid. Rodgers just goes and talks. I don't have a problem with that. But as Leberfeld said, he gives these folks nothing. The media types get nothing from Aaron Rodgers. His name does generate headlines. His name does generate clicks for these folks who trash him. So they have nothing to lose and everything to gain, right? Like, okay, well, this guy's not going to talk to us anyway. It's not like he's going to turn down an interview. It's not like he's going to refuse to give us a scoop. He gives us the cold shoulder as it is. So why not just go after him? Use his name, and no matter what he does, he's wrong, right? Aaron Rodgers, doesn't matter what he does to these people. He's wrong in every aspect. And the thing I'd like to point out, because some of us do have short memories, and all this does is really expose the bias of the media toward Aaron Rodgers. And look, I'm not one for like, woe is me. Like, Aaron Rodgers is going to be fine. I'm not even saying I feel bad for the guy, but I'm just asking for consistency. Like, be consistent in your reporting. So if you're going to say, think back to last year, right, when Aaron Rodgers decided he wanted to take up a roster spot in a lost season. He wasn't costing the team anything. Aaron Rodgers wanted a roster spot so that he could practice with the team and get a good couple weeks of practice versus a day or two during an off-season session. But the media took completely different. No matter what Aaron Rodgers did, he was in the wrong. So last year when Aaron Rodgers wanted to stay on the roster to build chemistry and work with his teammates, and by the way, you're working in season, doing actual game prep, actual full practices, like you're doing the things you're doing in practice at that point are a lot closer to the real thing. They are the real thing, minus the fact he's not going to play. But he's basically doing in-season prep and then going out there, even if he is running the scout team, he's obviously in the meetings. He's out there with his teammates with, full 53-man roster, game planning, all that stuff. Whereas the off-season stuff, contact, not going to be there, not preparing for an opponent, installs, stuff like that, less in-depth. So when Aaron Rodgers wanted to be with his teammates in the huddle on the field for several weeks doing real prep, that was selfish. Remember that? Remember when the media said it was selfish for Aaron Rodgers to want to practice with his team? And we saw a million articles about Nick Bawden, who, look, God bless him, Nick Bawden, nice enough guy, nothing personal against the guy. But he's a guy who plays a few snaps a game. He's a guy you could easily upgrade by putting Jeremy Ruckert in his spot. You've got a better player on the roster. But all of a sudden, all these stories about Nick Bawden and, oh my God, woe is me, Aaron Rodgers kept his roster spot, and look what he's done to Nick Bawden, who, by the way, was off the roster for about 10 minutes and then active that Sunday. But Aaron Rodgers, when he wanted to practice with his team last year, and it cost Nick Bawden a roster spot for 10 minutes, the whole media narrative was how terribly selfish Aaron Rodgers was, and it was Aaron's world, and he didn't care about anyone else. That was to get multiple weeks of practice in season. Fast forward to this offseason, Aaron Rodgers misses 2 days of practice, and he's selfish. He's not invested. He doesn't care. So when Aaron Rodgers practices, he's a jerk. When Aaron Rodgers doesn't practice, he's a jerk. So you see what I mean? When the media decides that they want to slander you no matter what you do, there is no right answer. So keep that in mind in the future when you're looking at headlines regarding Aaron Rodgers. And I'm not here to say the guy's perfect. He, like everyone on planet Earth, has said and done some dumb things. But this thing where we pretend that the media is being objective and, they're just reporting. No, they're just exposing their bias. They said he was a terrible guy for wanting to be on the team and practice last year, and now he's a terrible guy because he wanted 2 days off. So which one is it? It's both are the wrong answer. And I don't know how many of you people have people in your lives who are not well mentally and who find ways to make every answer the wrong answer. That's the way the media has become with Aaron Rodgers. No matter what he says, he's wrong. No matter what he does, he's wrong. But I get it. I have no doubt that there are people out there who are going after Rodgers who know full well how disingenuous, how inconsistent they're being. But they got bosses. And the boss is like, we need ratings. We need clicks. Think of something you can say that will generate clicks. So now, and the thing with Aaron Rodgers, you've got this future Hall of Famer. Now, granted, Green Bay isn't the biggest market in the world, but it's another. I mean, New York is, but it's split because of the Giants, of course. But the New York market and the Green Bay market, even though he's not there, you can't tell me Packers fans don't have an interest in Aaron Rodgers. They care. I don't know if they'll. I'm sure many of them will admit it. Some may not. But I guarantee you, when they see his name somewhere, they click. And if you're in New York and you're a Jets fan, you click. If you're a Giants fan, you might click. Because you might fall for it and think, oh, I'll give my Jets fans buddies a hard time about this Aaron Rodgers story. So Aaron Rodgers' name, especially when you tie it to negativity, right? Because negativity sells. That's what everybody goes for. That's why all your headlines on all your news feeds are negative, negative, negative. So they just tie it in. They try to make it Aaron Rodgers is a terrible guy. And no matter what he does, he's in the wrong. And Dano says impartiality is getting hard to come. It really is in every aspect of life. Doesn't matter if it's sports, day-to-day news, politics, whatever. It's everyone's got a slant and an angle. And I think that was always the case. It's just never been so. I don't watch a lot of the news. I really don't. Because I don't want to hear about anybody. The stories we hear that turn out to be wrong, that are just sort of what do they say? It's more important nowadays to be first than to be right. And all the number of news stories I've seen in the last 5-6 years, where you get the initial story up front, and then it turns out, look, Aaron Rodgers, COVID. Remember that? Aaron Rodgers has COVID toe because he missed some time with a toe injury. And Rolling Stone, I get it. Rolling Stone, music magazine, not where people go for their news. But to be fair, Rolling Stone used to be, I don't know how many people realize this, like a solid, journalistic venture when they would get into news stories. They weren't bad. And now we get them blatantly lying. Not even like, oh, we got it wrong. It was a misunderstanding. No, we just lied. We just 100% lied. We got all the clicks. By the time the truth comes out, doesn't matter. We got the clicks already. We wanted the clicks. We wanted the reads. We got them. Turned out we were lying. Everyone's got a short-term memory. Doesn't matter. No one's going to care. They're going to read the next clickbait story too. So some pretty insane stuff there with Aaron Rodgers and the inconsistency in reporting. But it is what it is. It's now in the past. Rodgers is back. He's been at just about. Let me find the tweet. This was from Connor Hughes. Reads like it came from the team, which is fine. I mean, look, the team is going to give some reporters info. I think Connor Hughes recently had a thing with Mike Florio, who called him out, oh, he's a mouthpiece for the team. Listen, the team has to get stories out, and sometimes they'll give it to a reporter. And so, no, I'm not knocking Connor Hughes here. But it looks like it came from the team. Jets QB Aaron Rodgers missed the team's mandatory minicamp because of a pre-planned trip to Egypt, multiple sources told SNY TV. He attended every day of Phase 1, missed just 1 week of Phase 2, and attended every OTA practice. And in parentheses, they call them brackets in England. I almost said brackets, and everyone would have been like, what are you talking about? In parentheses, structured the same way as 2 minicamp workouts. Jets were made aware of the trip. They do not believe it will impact their season whatsoever. Could you imagine if the Jets were like, oh, what now? He missed 2 off-season practices. What are we going to do? Of course they don't think it's going to impact their season. Although that wasn't communicated clearly initially. And that's, to me anyway, that's the part that sounds like it came right from the team. Make it clear that we realize we weren't as clear as we could have been or should have been. So get that out there. We got something here from Charles. How we doing, Charles? Good evening, Jet Nation. We need a Hall of Famer, Aaron Rodgers, All-Pro Hassan Reddick to be in camp, and I think they will be. We're going to need Aaron Rodgers if we're going to move past the Bills. Listen, anything can happen injury-wise, but when the bell rings, when the season starts, Rodgers will be there. They didn't have a lineman with 10 sacks, and I'm fine with that, honestly, Charles, because they're going to have a bunch of guys with 6, 7, 8, 9 sacks, I think. You look at how heavily the Jets rotate their guys out. You look at the number of very talented guys they have. I don't see a path to anybody getting 13, 14, 15 sacks. I mean, the win rate that guys are going to have will be insane to get that many sacks on a team that rotates guys out as heavily as the Jets do. I don't think the reps will be there for anyone to put up huge sack numbers. But as a team, I think they will put up huge sack numbers. Important to come to terms with Reddick. And Reddick that's a weird situation. We talked about that. I don't know who to blame. Who are you going to blame? And it's funny. I tweeted it out a couple weeks ago. Who do you blame for this? Reddick, Joe Douglas? I don't know. A lot of people blame Douglas and Reddick. I don't know how you do that. The only way you can blame those guys or blame one of those guys, in my mind, is if you were listening in on the phone calls. Like, if one side, be it the Jets or Reddick, if one side made assurances that they either didn't live up to or tried to change or back away from, like, without knowing that, how do you blame either side? If Hassan Reddick's agent spoke to the Jets and said, look, man, my guy's going to be there. Don't worry about it. We know he's due a deal. We're happy to come in and let him have a big year and get a contract after the season. Now, I'm not saying that happened. But if something like that happened, or if Joe Douglas said, yeah, man, you're coming to New York, we're going to get you locked up. We know you want a long-term deal. We're going to give you the money you're looking for, and you're going to be a Jet for a long time. If Joe Douglas said that, and he's not doing it, it's his fault. If Reddick implied he would play and isn't, it's his fault. But we don't know. So I know we always want someone to blame. We always want a finger to point at somebody. This guy did this and that. I don't know who said what. Okay? And I believe there were multiple reports on it. One saying the Jets made a promise and backed away. Another saying there was an understanding that he might not get a deal. Whatever it may be, we don't know what was said on that call, but just to avoid the amount of egg he would have on his face for not having Reddick in camp, I believe the Jets and Joe Douglas are going to do what they have to do to get Reddick signed. And the question becomes, though, does he miss some of camp, right? Because when you get these, how many times do we see guys miss time, miss camp, miss OTAs, miss everything, and then come in and try to go too hard, too fast, and they get hurt? That would be catastrophic. Charles goes on to say Jets have to bring pressure from all sides, and they will. Again, the big question will be DT outside of Quinn and Williams, but I think Will McDonald is going to be absolutely fine. I think Reddick, you're going to have him in camp. You've got JJ. I don't have any problem. I don't have any concerns as far as the Jets' ability to bring pressure. Let's see. We need a big year from Michael Clemens, Jermaine Johnson. And Michael Clemens, I mean, define big year, right? I think he needs to be solid. He needs to be a good player. I think that we may see him on the inside again a fair bit because of the fact that they've lost the guys they have. DT is a big question for the Jets. That's what makes Leonard Taylor, the UDFA out of Miami. I think he could be a guy who makes the roster and plays. You watch his film from a couple years ago, and he was phenomenal. Down year last year, and then goes undrafted. Like, when a guy with that, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like, that's concerning. When a guy has as much talent as Taylor, and they don't get drafted, I mean, you're talking major production at a major program against really good schools, and then he goes undrafted. So that tells me there are some questions, whether it's character, whether it's work ethic, whatever it may be. Let me just put it this way. There is no way a player as good as that should go undrafted. So when he does, you kind of look and go, all right, what's going on here? Like, nobody even took a flyer on this guy, 7th rounder. But if whatever people were concerned about, if those concerns can be eliminated, alleviated, whatever it may be, this is a guy who can make the roster and play. Thoughts on the throwback logo designer suing the team league if you haven't already planned on to touch on it? Dano, I hadn't heard about that. Is that something that broke today? I heard about the lawsuits with DirecTV and the league, which I think they settled. I think they're going to give people some like 3-4 grand each. But Dana, no, I hadn't seen anyone suing the team / league about the logos. Okay, yep, today. All right. I've been running around today. Just woke up from a quick 2-hour nap and thought I'd hop on and talk about Rodgers when I saw the tweet. So I hadn't heard that. Claiming he wasn't paid. Well, okay. Well, look, if the guy was hired to do a job, and he wasn't paid for it, that should be easy for him to prove. Easy for the Jets to prove they did. So if they didn't, I think that'll be resolved fairly quickly. And yeah, if the Jets agreed to pay him and they didn't, well then pay the guy. Come on, let's go. So let me see. Yeah, agreed to be paid. Yeah, okay. Like I said, news to me. I generally don't do a lot of uniform logo conversations. Although, as I've said in the past, the thing I like about this, and I think a lot of fans do, you like when you see stuff come back that, the logos they're going with now, that's the stuff I've seen, that I grew up with, right, when I started watching the team. So it does give you those nice vibes. Think back to when you were a much younger man enjoying the team, as a teenager before you realized what you were in for over the next 30, 40, 50 years. 30, I don't know how many in my case, 37? 37 years, Jesus. Charles, again, explore a trade for Sutton. I just think, yeah, and I know Simmons is still available. They have zero cap space right now, Charles. Like literally zero. Okay, I know over the cap says 5-6 million, but teams like to keep 5-6 million for in-season expenses, stuff that may come up. Simmons, last I heard, listening to the With the First Pick podcast, they touched on Simmons' status, and I believe they said he is not looking to take a cheap deal. He is not looking. He basically wants money and a contender. Jets can offer contender. Jets can't offer money. They're sitting at 5-6 million, and as we just discussed, Hassan Reddick wants a pay raise. So if Reddick's looking for a big bump in pay and the Jets have no money, you're not going to go get Simmons, who's probably looking for, over 10 million a year. If he's not taking a discount, he's an all-pro player. So unfortunately, not likely. Even Sutton, I don't know what the implications would be after a deal, how much of his cap would get or his guaranteed money would get eaten up by Denver. But I think Leonard Taylor's a good player. Agree. I think the receiver thing is going to be. I don't think they're going to go get a receiver. I think adding a receiver is something they might do in season if things are going well and they feel like they need another one. But with what they have now, I think they're probably banking on a bounce back from Allen Lazard, looking at what he did with Rodgers the previous year in Green Bay. And listen, Lazard, if he can be even close to that, and he's your 4th, 5th receiver, that's not bad. We talked about it on our show. Chris Schubert kind of said he thinks that Jason Brownley already this year will be ready to take some of Lazard's reps, a significant chunk. I kind of was wondering aloud and thinking, could it happen? Chris Schubert's like, yeah. Asked Chris, and he thinks it's a lock that we'll see Brownley take Lazard's job, which could happen. I wouldn't completely rule it out. Listen, Lazard is the bigger guy, but Brownley plays bigger, right? We talk about players about, this guy plays big, that guy plays big. What that means is he's 6'2", but the guy who's 6'5" doesn't go up and fight for the ball the way the guy who's 6'2" does. And Brownley, if you go back and look at the tweets, I said pre-draft, I said this kid is, makes one exciting play after another, and you just see him consistently out-jump defenders and pull the football down. Now, not exactly anything to get worked up over, but if you look at some of his preseason work last year, he had a couple targets where he had a chance to do just that, and he didn't come up with the ball. So you look at it and go, okay, wait a minute, is he going to be able to do that at the pro level? All right, fine, you can wonder, but I mean, rookie jitters, it's 1 or 2 plays. It's not the end of the world. I know people love to jump on guys and demand they be released if they don't like the way they stretch in pregame. But, pump the brakes a little bit and recognize the fact that the kid was a very good player in college, did enough in preseason and camp last year to make the team, stuck all year. But then didn't really see the ball because the offense was a mess. It didn't matter who was didn't matter who your receivers were, they weren't getting the ball. And let's not rule out Xavier Gipson, Charles. I know you're saying they need a receiver, but Gibson's a guy who I feel like as the season went on, he got better. He didn't have, I think he only had one game where he had like significant targets down the field. I'm trying to remember, I'm going off the top of my head. I think he had like a 70-yard performance, something like that. But if you're going to line him up in the slot with his skill set, and you've got Aaron Rodgers throwing him the ball, and you would imagine he's going to be sharing time with Malachi Corley, who's going to be, who has the potential to be a fantastic weapon for this offense. They may not need as much help at receiver as we think. And let's couple that with the fact that they've got the defense. They're not going to need these guys to be Megatron. They're not going to need these guys to be all world. Just Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers is healthy, and if Aaron Rodgers is anywhere close to being what he's been in the past, he's going to put the ball on time, on target, and put you in position to make a play with the ball after the catch. And I think that's what they're expecting from Malachi Corley. That's why they drafted him. It's what he does well. Xavier Gipson is a guy who, out of the slot with his quickness, agility, he's a guy who could be able to make some plays. And then you have Brownley on the boundary. And that's, even with Mike Williams, if he's, whenever he'll be back, even if he's dinged up and you go with Brownlee, Lazard early on, these are guys who, as frustrating as Lazard was last year, like I said, the previous year, he was much better with Rodgers. We'll see what happens. I mean, it's a safe bet he's gone after this year. It would take an absolute, there would have to be multiple injuries and Lazard would have to have a career year to come back next season, 2026, because he's just, I think Robert Saleh slipped up a little when he said during the year, Lazard's here for another season. He's got a multi-year deal. He's got like 3-4 years left on his deal. And Saleh said in the presser that he's got 2 years left or a year left after this year. So I would not expect Allen Lazard to be around after next season, but that doesn't mean he can't be a contributor this year. And again, just in terms of if he's your number 2 receiver, you're like, oh man, that's like you panic a little bit. But if he's your 3rd or 4th guy on the boundary, behind Gibson, somebody like that, and the receiver position, as always, it kind of feels like every year there's going to be some long conversations about who sticks and who doesn't. I look at Irv Smith. I felt like the way Irv Smith played last year was the reason why they were able to let Justin Hardy go, because Smith was absolutely phenomenal on specials. And Saleh said it when he was asked, why did you bring him back? Why did you bring why did you bring him up? Why was he added to the roster? Saleh just said, look, the kid's a monster on specials. And we saw it. He showed it. So I think he's going to be a guy who does have a chance to stick. There will be other names that get thrown around. We'll see who does what. We should be back Wednesday night. That is the plan. Hopefully no power outages, no issues. Everything goes smoothly. Thanks for jumping in. Thanks for joining us. We will be back next week. Oh, real quick, Charles, that's a little more for us. Let's see. Extend Breece Hall, Michael Carter, Jermaine Johnson after the season. Just need to work out a contract with Reddick and Malachi Corley worth a high 3rd-round draft pick. Just need to play error-free football to beat the Niners. They do. You got to be good against the Niners, obviously. But week 1, it's going to be it's going to come down to coaching, or at least that's going to be a big part of it, right? Getting ready, preparing for that season opener. But yeah, I think Carter will get done. Breece Hall should get done, even though he's a running back. Should you pay a running back? A lot of people think you shouldn't. I think if Breece stays healthy this year and plays to his potential, I don't see how you don't bring him back. But if he has a big enough year that he's looking for 15, 16 million and Braylon Allen plays well behind him, look, another conversation for another time. Love Breece Hall. Hope he goes for 1,500 and gets a new deal. We'll see what happens there. Jermaine Johnson, a lot of these guys, they got a lot of guys that in the next 12 to 24 months, they're going to have to get re-signed to long-term deals, and they will not be cheap, which is good. The Jets finally have good players. I've seen people complain about this. I've seen people complain, oh, we got to pay so many guys. Yeah, that's what happens when your players are good, Jets fans. I know it's been a while, but when you draft players who don't suck, you have to pay them if you want them to stay, rather than going out and paying other people's free agents to come play for you. So that'll wrap this one up. Have a good one, Jets fans. Aaron Rodgers back from Egypt. The media will find some reason to make that a horrible thing. Have a good one, Jets fans.